cool. I was very worried that it wouldn't be visible and with this lighting, but I guess, can you see it from the back? Yeah, okay, cool. As Nuno introduced me, I'm a designer, so that's kind of weird for a JavaScript conference, but I started off as a designer, and then I went kind of like to front-end development. So I got some like JavaScript background as well and Node. So I work at Nodejitsu, and I do JavaScript barcamps back in Kraków when I live in Poland. So that's about it, about me. So yeah, I started working mostly at startups, but I did some like huge agency work too. So my talk will be mostly based on my experience. So it's not like I'm giving you like prescription for like how you should do development. It's just like basically a few ideas and problems that I've encountered like during my work. So there was this theme during this conference about simplicity. Paulo already like kind of stole my talk a little bit. So he was defining complexity by like how to like kind of achieve simplicity. So basically is achieving simplicity is doing stuff as quickly and as efficiently as possible, right? So you're kind of subtracting things that are obvious and meaningless and like adding the stuff which is like essential for your app or website or whatever you are doing, right? So basically simplicity equals focus. So we are kind of experts at screwing our lives up, both like in personal and developers, right? So we are making experiences we are trying to create both in like programming and design as well, less appealing because it's like so complicated. So sometimes we also have interfaces and websites which look very like appealing. They are so nice and user experience is great. But on the other hand, what's not visible, like for example code, it can be like very not performing well. Usability might be crappy. So like at the first glance, it may look great, but on the other hand, it has some significant performance or usability issues. So a week ago, there was a great conference here in Lisbon called Refresh LX, and this is like a great quote from Simon Collison. We often talk about pursuing simplicity to reduce complexity, but complexity is quite valuable, and it couldn't be like it's like the best definition. So it doesn't mean that we should like simplified experiences by like any means possible, because like complex and sophisticated solutions are ours desired, right? They are in demand. So we're trying to solve these complex issues. So Jan was saying that we should reinvent the wheel, and that's one approach we can take. But we can also like start off with like writing quality code. So do you all remember like recently Dropbox switched to CoffeeScript from JavaScript, and there was like a lot of trolling going on this like in the comments because they were like, oh yeah, so you did this cool thing, like this new technology, CoffeeScript. Like you were saying that no one uses CoffeeScript in here, like it was like for hands. So they did that thing and they had some like justification for it. But a lot of people were pointing out that their JavaScript was crappy. So instead of like kind of like be trying to like choose the new technology because it's hype, you should be like doing the right thing from the very beginning. So like be careful about the quality of the stuff you are doing and have the right justification for it. So this all comes down to being slave of your tools. Because we have these awesome tools. We have like open source and it's so great. We have GitHub. So they're very useful like for solving our issues, which are very specific usually. But they're very useful if you know how to use them properly and when you have the right justification. So we have frameworks. Like everyone is using frameworks. So it's using a framework, like any framework. Yeah, like basically everyone in the room. So that's so cool. Like Brian was saying yesterday that maybe you should try like a lot of frameworks, but maybe you shouldn't be using any framework at all. The idea of a framework is really cool because it's like meant to simplify your life. And it's made to like make your developer life easier and to simplify processes and make them more efficient and fast. you have like all good coding practices enclosed, you are like common issues addressed, you have different libraries, so it's like all awesome. Because like they're created by like really seasoned developers, they're open source projects, so you are sure that it's like kind of a good solution. But there are some considerations you need to take into account. Like, is this framework like necessary for my project? Like, I'm doing a simple website. Like, I'm a designer. I don't know shit about programming, and I need to like have a website, right? So I would just go and take a framework. But that's not necessarily a good idea, right? Because maybe it is just too big for me. Maybe it has features that I don't need. Maybe it's affecting performance. So these are like all like some kind of basic considerations you need to think about when you're doing that. So basically, frameworks are not a substitute for thinking, right? Because like, yeah, I mean, I'm a programmer. I need a nice website. So I'll just like go and take a framework because like it's so nice. And of course, there is a justification for it because of course you want a nice website, you want a nice appealing interface. But on the other hand, you're just like kind of blindly following the hype. So that's not good. So yeah, so there are like kind of few very popular frameworks, like kind of full stack frameworks, like Foundation, HTML5 boilerplate, and our beloved framework Bootstrap. Who's using Bootstrap, by the way? Oh, okay. Do you like it? Okay. So I had a very like nice conversation with Chris like 30 minutes ago, and he said Bootstrap is the new Drupal. And this is like couldn't be more true. So Bootstrap is like the second most watched, no, actually it's the most watched repository on GitHub, and Node.js is the second one. Bootstrap has like 5,000 lines of code. And I'm not saying that the Bootstrap is wrong. It's like, I bet it's useful if you have a good like use case for it. But I've seen people who are just like using Bootstrap for like one-pager projects, not modifying the design. So you probably all have seen like shitloads of websites with this like dark navigation bar at the top. And you're just like, oh my God, no, again. So it's kind of like all awesome because like we have these frameworks and development is very, very fast. But on the other hand, like there are some considerations, obviously, and some like disadvantages of having framework. So you have this like unsemantic code. Like if you ever use like a wide variety of frameworks, you probably notice that they are all like based on grids. So you have all this unsemantic naming of diffs. So it's like column 1, column 3, column 100, whatever. And you're like, oh my God, this is not working. Especially if you are working in like distributed large team. So for example, you are coming and it's like to see a project and you are supposed to like fix some bugs. And you're watching the code and it's like, oh my God, where is div ending? Like, oh my God, I need to like memorize all of that. So you're not taking the advantage of native HTML5 elements which are holding the actual semantic value. Like HTML5 is awesome. Like we all know that, but it's not used properly in most of framework. So you have like all this spam of unnecessary like diffs. So, and you need to remember about people who are like, who have like various disabilities, right? For example, people who are blind and they're using like screen reader. So imagine that you're blind and you're trying to like listen to a website which is done in Bootstrap or whatever. And it's like div, column 1, etc. So like you have no idea where you are and what's happening right now. So the way to approach this is to add ARIA roles. So you can add the role attribute and say, okay, so this is like the main content for my website, and this is the navigation. So that might help with usability. Another problem is learning, because like obviously you're like, for example, yeah, okay, so I will use HTML5 boilerplate. I think it will work for my project. Okay, so you need to spend a significant amount of time for learning the framework and to familiarize yourself with the code. So you need to think like if it's like doesn't make sense to like spend all of this time instead of just write your own boilerplate. So, and of course you need to read the documentation, so like all very like time consuming. So frameworks basically are useful for speeding up the production and development processes once you learn them. Otherwise, it's not working at all. So I've seen many developers trying to use different frameworks, and they were like, okay, so should I just like go and modify the CSS I'm given, or should I just like override it? What should I be doing? Because obviously I need to manage updates. So should I just go and override, or should I create another style sheet, which is obviously like another request, so it's not kind of like optimized in a good way. So you need to remember that you will be probably managing updates, because these are all open source projects. So there will be updates, like Foundation, whatever. Don't kill yourself. Oops. So you need to manage updates. So you need to keep in mind the fact that there will be maybe some huge modifications to the code. So you should probably do another style sheet, but then you have another request. It's like another thing you need to consider. And of course, there's like the weight of the code. Because like I've said, Bootstrap is like over 5,000 lines. It's a lot. Do you need it all? Like, are you sure that's all needed? But you need to be really, really sure that you know what you are modifying. Otherwise, you will just end up, for example, removing half of the styles, some dependencies needed for something else. And then you will be like, oh my God, I messed up something again. So you need to be really familiar to address these issues. So, but we do have advantages. So we have this faster development, right? Because it's reduced testing time. We have open source, so like we have really seasoned developers doing that. We have tests for that. We have GitHub issues. We have Stack Overflow. So it's like all community driven. It's all tested. Common issues are addressed. You don't need to search for a reset. You don't need to search for like normalized styles. You have ready-made widgets, so it's awesome. It gets kind of tricky if it comes to mobile. It's not necessarily as good as we want it to be, but there's this amazing idea which came from Jeremy Keith. So he started kind of this idea of local mobile testing labs. There is a website which is listing all labs to work. So you can basically go there and grab like multiple devices and just test your product, which is awesome. Also, it's like kind of very beginner friendly. That may be controversial, but on the other hand, you can just download a piece of code and play around and see how it works, see like really good practices, and basically have fun with it. So I've seen many developers, like kind of beginner developers, who are like, I'm not necessarily sure how it works, what I'm supposed to code. So it's always better to like have a framework and try to play around and familiarize yourself with it. So we had frameworks, and we have libraries as well. So there's a lot of libraries, right? But they weren't necessarily designed to work with each other. So this is a quote from PPK. Worst case of copy pasting I saw going on around the web, my answer is jQuery. Who's using jQuery in here? Damn, okay. So PPK did this huge survey. He got like 80,000 answers, and 80% of people said that they're using jQuery in more than 50% of projects. Also 60% said that they are aware of the fact that they could solve an issue, but on the other hand, they use the library. So why it happens? And also, more than 50% of people were saying that every project they're like creating has some libraries. So obviously, there is an issue, like because people are saying, yeah, okay, so I'm aware of the fact that I'm perfectly able to write this JavaScript, but I'm just choosing not to because I'm too lazy or something. I don't know. So what I like kind of seeing in like developer work is that you can use CSS animations and document query selector to replace jQuery in a lot of cases. So why people are using jQuery? Because it's like really easy or pretty to use, or maybe because jQuery was kind of designed for dealing with cross-browser issues. Because like, of course, it's perfectly understandable that we weren't using CSS animations like a few years ago because there was no CSS animations. But right now we can kind of ditch jQuery and all like dependencies in libraries and just use the plain JavaScript and CSS to do that. That's not like a really popular tool, but within one company, which was like a distributed agency, a huge team, a kind of PSD to HTML service, I've seen many developers were like so lazy and not using that code hinting. They were like, oh, there's this amazing thing. It's called code generators, like CSS free please, Colorzilla, and the like. I don't know if you were using that or not, but this is basically like how to mess with W3C specification. So it's kind of fast, but on the other hand, it has like no shortcut variants. They're not optimized. They're not the latest specifications. They have unnecessary vendor prefixes. They can be replaced really easily by hinting in your editor. So, and people are just like copy pasting, like really copy pasting all the time. So, for example, one problem like you can encounter, if you're using CSS free Py, I know that most of people don't care about Internet Explorer, but there are people who actually care about getting a CSS free working properly in Internet Explorer. So they're using CSS free Py for support. So if you go to Colorzilla, this website where you can create gradients, it generates code with filter, which is obviously a support for Internet Explorer. But then it doesn't work with CSS free Py. So if you're not aware of like this conflicts, you're basically screwed. Another really kind of a nice thing is pre-processing. So a lot of people are using pre-processing. How many of you are using pre-processing? Yeah. So there's LAS, SAS, Stylus, RCSS, that's the new thing. So it's really cool. Like we have mixins, variables, which are actually like a ditto strap in W3C. You have less code to write, it's faster and easier to maintain, it compiles to CSS anyway. It's all really cool, but we have a really hard time debugging it. It's like, how do you watch the minified file instead of like a source? Like, how do you debug it? There are some tools. There is an extension for Firebug called FireSAS, and there's a SAS inspector for Chrome and SAS Sloyd for Chrome and Safari. So that kind of gives you a solution for the debugging problem, but it's not working as you wish it to work. There is another thing which is called source maps. So we can actually, it's actually done for CoffeeScript, so you can map the minified file to the CoffeeScript file. It's in progress for SAS and LESS, so I guess it will solve the like main issue with preprocessing. Of course, another issue with preprocessing is like you're using mixins and extend rule a lot probably. So that may make your code really, really bloated. So it all comes down to the fact that we need to think about what the hell are we doing as developers, right? Like how we can improve. So it is kind of a hype club because remember when HTML5 and CSS free surfaced, everyone was like, yeah, oh my God, this is so awesome. Like, yeah, let's just do all the CSS free sweetness. Let's just do some button styling. So we need to stop overusing cool effects and think about optimization and about code quality first. So to do this, you need to ask the right questions. You need to like ask, okay, am I doing it right? Can I use something like other tool instead? Can I just write my own code? Like, can I just write JavaScript instead of using jQuery or some other library? Is it the best solution for my use case? Should I be writing like my own code? Will it affect optimization? Will it affect usability? Another thing to remember is that beautiful not necessarily equals usable. Like kind of, you can see like really heavyweight designs which are so like, have a lot of illustrations in it, and it's all beautiful, but on the other hand, it's not serving the purpose. It's making hard to navigate. It's making hard to like achieve the goal you're trying to achieve. So it all comes down to optimization, to like thinking about what's the core idea and what's the goal for the website or app you're creating. So another thing is simplicity does not equal minimalism. Like getting rid of features can be very confusing. For you, it might be, yeah, like this sign-up process is really, really long. So what should I do? Oh yeah, I should just like cut it to one step. But then you will think that it's awesome. But on the other hand, it can be very hard to user to actually sign up because it's like too complicated. So you can actually, by trying to achieve simplicity, you can like make the experience really hard and really complex. And I think the last thing, just don't overdo it. Just don't repeat yourself. Just try to justify your decisions and try to put kind of the user first. That's all. Thanks. And the slides will be on speaker deck. Hug. I want a hug. After talk, hug.